3 limbs ripped off, infected with a deadly parasite. You must save your research. Drag yourself through the corridors of a secret research lab on a remote asteroid, fight off horribly mutated monsters, inject countless syringes of vaccines, and survive at all costs. Endoparasitic is a survival horror game developed and published by Ms. It was released on Steam for Microsoft Windows, Mac, and Linux on October 24th, 2022. Endoparasitic was initially a Game Jam entry, which he turned into a full game. Made in the Go. Engine, Miz's previous game was Wrought Flesh, and it's easy to see the style and genre Miz has come to win. It clearly demonstrates this in this title. You play as Sint, a scientist who was stationed on a secret research lab with several other scientists. The research conducted here was on a parasite and its potential applications, but after the traumatic event of your limbs getting ripped off, you have to cauterize your stumps and then travel through the lab in order to preserve your research. Sint is infected with one of these parasites and it is slowly killing him. This is shown as a health bar in the inventory. Here we can also see our ammo, health syringes, and how many bullets are remaining in each weapon. Endoparasitic has one of the most unique gameplay mechanics in a horror game. Everything you do and every action you take can only be completed with one hand, from reloading to pulling switches, healing, and even movement. Every bullet must be manually loaded into the weapon, which leaves the player open to attack. As soon as the player decides to pull out a weapon to defend themselves, they are immediately left vulnerable to attack as they cannot move while holding a weapon. Would it be better to move away from a swarm of enemies to reload, or to heal? Every action the player takes must be thought out beforehand, and it needs to be quick too, as the enemies will not wait for you to decide on your next move. Endoparasitic is an incredibly harrowing and claustrophobic game that fills the player with an unbelievable amount of dread and anxiety. The constant juggling of actions as well as infantry management make for an incredibly unnerving experience. The environment tells a horrifying story of a tragedy that took place. The dead scientists, the blood spattered everywhere, and the mutated victims of the parasite. The player never feels at ease, as there are not many moments where the player can catch their breath. There is always danger lurking, and even in the slower paced moments, the player needs to keep moving at all times. As the parasite in Sint's body moves closer to his brain, the player must reach the next syringe to delay the horrifying mutation. The player will find an arsenal of weapons throughout the campaign, including a revolver, a shotgun, a flare, and a crossbow. Ammo is in short supply and the player must make every bullet count. The actual weapons are strapped to the player's back and the player needs to physically remove the weapon from its holster to use it. This adds a layer of depth to an already unique movement system. Only when the weapon is in the player's hand can the player reload or fire. There are 5 enemy types that you'll encounter in the main game: the mutated scientist, the lab rat, the corpse trap, the mutated lab monkey, and the hunter. Each enemy requires a different method to defeat them or to avoid them altogether. The mutated scientist is the basic enemy and can be put down fairly easily. The lab rat is an enemy that will squeak to make the player aware of its presence, then it would dart towards the player and attack. The player has a brief window where they can react and pull out a weapon to fire. The corpse trap lays on the ground and does not attack unless the player moves too quickly whilst nearby. The lab monkey is blind and sensitive to sound and will kill you in a single attack, so be careful when shooting weapons nearby. The hunter is a teleporting enemy that will periodically teleport to the player and perform a dash attack. The player can quickly sidestep the attack to avoid damage. The hunter cannot be killed until the final encounter, but can be slowed down until then. The final encounter has the player enter a room with the hunter and 4 parasitic biomasses in each corner. The player can slide along the floor to avoid the hunter as the floor is covered in blood. The player must balance swapping between damaging the biomasses, reloading, and keeping the health topped up, or while dodging the hunter's dash attack. Once the 4 biomasses have been destroyed, the hunter is defeated, and the player must progress to the next room. In this room we find Lucy, a member on board the research station, believes her to be chosen by the parasite as she is supposedly compatible with the parasite. Lucy then leaves Sint on the research station alone to die, believing that the parasite will be the end of him. Cut to black and we see to be continued. Endoparasitic 2 is currently being developed and is set to release at the end of 2024, and I'm really looking forward to see where the story picks up. Endoparasitic has a relatively short campaign, only taking around 3 to 4 hours, but it also has an endless roguelike mode where the player must beat 5 new boss enemies. However, I'm less favourable to this mode as I feel like the campaign is a tighter, more curated experience. But if you need more Endoparasitic, there you go. I cannot recommend this game enough. It is a bite-sized horror experience, has a unique gameplay style, and keeps the player on the edge of their seat from start to finish. Definitely check this one out if you haven't already.